2019. Previously consultant in medicine at Manchester and Stoke-on-Trent, United Kingdom. Publications in peer-reviewed journals and abstract presentations in national and international conferences. Keen interest in clinical governance activities. His career goals involve in good clinical research and established international nephrology science, which I believe will improve outcomes for renal patients. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for the next speaker of the day, Dr. Rammohan, Shripat.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, sir.
At the outset, I would like to thank Susanna for the wonderful introduction and Dr. Shamai for inviting me for this conference. Before I start, I would like to know how many of you are dialysis technicians or doing the dialysis technology course? So most of you? Because I wasn't sure as to how to pitch the talk. I don't know where Sivi is. Sivi told me not to do the usual stuff and to do something which will be useful for even the seniors, because all the usual stuff are taught in the classes. So I didn't include any basic stuff, and then I got a bit worried when I saw that there are lots of other people as well. So I think you guys keep moving between halls depending on the talks. That's good for me. So this is what I'm going to talk. I'm going to keep it very simple, because that is where we can have an impact. It's not the high-end stuff which makes an impact to patient care. It's the simple things that we do. We need to understand the science behind it and the amount of research which goes behind even simple things which can make a huge difference to majority of the patients. So one of the most important things that we do is cleaning, isn't it? Before we do dialysis, whether it is PD or HT, exit site care, the skin disinfection before we needle the patient. This is the most important thing. And how many of you use iodine wherever you work? Yeah. Okay. How many of you use something else? So does that mean most of you don't use anything at all? Yeah? Okay. So what else do you use if not iodine? So there are different concentrations of iodine as well, isn't it? 5%, 7.5, 10%. There is a marginal, advantage in using the higher concentration of iodine. But of late, we realized that chlorhexidine in isopropyl alcohol is probably the best one. 10%, which is 2% weight by volume, chlorhexidine is the best one to clean the skin in terms of removing the bacteria load there. It cannot remove the spores, but at least it can remove the bacteria. In terms of post-surgical wound infection, it is not shown to be much difference, but then at least the clearance of the bacteria will be much higher. So even in surgical theaters, they are now slowly moving away from betadine to chlorhexidine. And chlorhexidine is available in a prepared vial, which is a glass vial in this plastic handle. You just have to squeeze the wings, and then the glass inside will break. There's a glass vial inside, it will break, and then the chlorhexidine will come onto the sponge, which you can use to clean. It comes in various volumes. Here at Narayana, we use AHD solution, AHD 3000, which is actually chlorhexidine 2% with ethanol, 80% ethanol. It's not isopropyl alcohol. There's a small difference. Ethanol does dehydrate the skin. It is a bit irritant to the skin. But when we use it only for a short while, and then we are not doing it repeatedly, so it should not be much of a problem, and it is cheap. Getting this is under proprietary, and we don't get it in India, the chloroprep. So short of that, we use 2% chlorhexidine with ethanol, and it works very well for us. And this chart, I don't know whether it projects well at all. It shows you the difference. Doesn't project here. So this one shows you the difference in terms of the amount of. Can you read this? Yeah. So you can see that chlorhexidine with isopropyl alcohol, it is excellent in terms of gram-negative, gram-positive, removing the gram-negative and gram-positive bacteria, and it has got persistent residual activity as well. Excellent. But then when it comes to iodine preparation, so this is chlorhexidine with isopropyl alcohol, and that is chloroprep, and this is chlorhexidine with ethanol. So both of them have got excellent persistent effect, but when it comes to iodine, it doesn't have a persistent effect. That is where chlorhexidine scores over. Yeah. So here the residual activity is excellent with chlorhexidine, whereas it is minimal with iodine-based preparations. Now coming to the advances in hemodialysis access, this is the regular needles that we've been using all the time, and hopefully very soon we should be using these needles, which actually are more like the IV cannula that we use. They do have a plastic cannula with a metal stillet inside, introducer, and then you'll get a flashback just like your IV cannula, and then you can leave your plastic inside, which has got a side hole as well, or it's got a couple of side holes. So the chances of injury after you've cannulated, because the patient has moved his or her hand, will be pretty much zero. There are lots of other devices which have been invented, which are used in the West because they do have a large cohort of home hemodialysis patients. When you have somebody with home hemodialysis and they've got a fistula or a graft, not a graft, actually fistula, you do something called as a buttonhole technique. Does anybody use buttonhole technique here? Any unit uses buttonhole technique? So you basically create a tract. It takes about anywhere between 6 to 12 weeks to create a tract. You use sharp needles to create a tract and go in the same place. So you've been taught to use a rope ladder technique to needle fistula, isn't it? So that you avoid aneurysms or pseudoaneurysms. Here it's the other way around. You use the same point and the same direction. Actually has been invented by a person of Indian origin who's a radiologist in Canada, along with people, his colleagues who are across the world, most of them in Germany. So this device is a percutaneous device. So it's got two large catheters. One of them you put it through the vein. That's a venous catheter, that's the arterial catheter, and they've got a series of magnets. So once you put the catheter into the artery and the vein, there's a switch, you switch it on, the magnets turn on, and then both the catheters, they stick to each other. So the artery and the vein are brought together without you doing any dissection at all. When we do the vascular anastomosis, what we do is we cut open, we mobilize the vein and then turn it over. Every blood vessel will have its own blood supply, vasa vasorum. So you're disrupting the blood supply. So apart from the hemodynamics which is involved, which leads to stenosis, it is also that you've disrupted the blood vessel, blood supply of the blood vessel, of the vein itself, and then there will be, whenever there is the movement, there will be some amount of fibrosis. So there's some amount of fibrosis from inside, there is some amount of endothelial proliferation from, fibrosis from outside and endothelial proliferation from inside, which leads to the stenosis. So here you're not going to do any cut at all. So just like how you would put a dialysis needle, or when we do a fistuloplasty, when we put the needle, wire and then balloon, etc. So here you just access the vein and the artery by needle, put these two catheters, and then activate the magnet, so the catheters come together, the artery and the vein come together, and there is a small radio frequency electrode here which pops out, and then it burns the artery and the vein wall. That's how it looks. So here the catheter has come from the top. Usually they come from low below or from higher above. So that's the artery, the red one. That's the red catheter. That's the blue vein. And then you can see that the radio frequency ablator has been activated, and then it will burn the tissue there, and then anastomosis is created. So there is going to be a fistula. So this has been successfully tried in a limited set of dialysis patients with a lot of success. The only problem is it can only do ulnar cephalic fistula, because the ulnar nerve deeply, it is very close to the veins there. We cannot do a radiocephalic fistula in this. And it leads to a lot of tributaries, and we might have to tie off a few tributaries, but then the chances of post-stenotic dilatation is very little, because it's almost like a 90-degree anastomosis here, and the chances of requiring some fistuloplasty in the first 1 year has come down as well. But we'll have to wait for another couple of years before it will be commercially available, I suppose. So coming to AV graft, so as all of you know, it's just a prosthetic tube which connects the artery to the vein. It could be a loop graft like this, or it could be a straight graft from artery to a vein. So various ways we can put it. And the most common ones that we have always used is expanded PTFE graft. There are lots of other grafts which are available, which have come out in the last 4-5 years. And most importantly, this RapidX Termo, which can be used within 24 hours. Otherwise, usually we have to wait for about a couple of weeks for all this swelling to settle down and the graft to be usable. But this one, we can use it within 24 hours. And there's one more, which is a 4-layer flexine graft, and then a tri-layer graft, which has got an inner gel layer which closes off by itself, so that even after repeated puncturing, because the graft has the ability to heal by itself from inside, the chances of the graft breaking down are very little. Where we are headed is towards a tissue engineered graft, where to a PTFE tube, they're going to grow some human tissue inside. It could be endothelial tissue, or it could be muscle cells which will be grown inside like this. So you've got a scaffold. The scaffold could be biological or it could be synthetic. On top of the scaffold, so there's various ways of growing the cells into the scaffold, and various cell types which can be used could be endothelial cells, muscle cells, fibroblasts, or stem cells. So it will take some time, because you'll have to take these stem cells from the patient itself and then grow it, and then keep the graft ready for the patient whenever he or she requires. So it will all have to be done in a planned way. We cannot do it as an emergency like how we tend to do it now. This is classified as graft by FDA. It was approved in 2018. Hero graft. It's not available in India as yet. Should be available very soon. So it is some kind of a hybrid between a catheter and a graft. So you've got a graft material which comes from the brachial artery all the way till the shoulder, and then a catheter. So just like how we would introduce a catheter into the IJV, you put a catheter into the IJV, tunnel it here, and then connect it with a titanium connector. So there's a graft material, a catheter material, and then it gets connected. So the advantages of this is it is usable immediately, very little surgical intervention here involved, just anastomosis, and then you tunnel the graft under the skin. The most common problem with AV grafts is the stenosis at the venous end of the anastomosis, where the graft goes and joins into the vein. That is where they develop a lot of endothelial intimal hyperplasia and stenosis. So 70% of grafts require fistuloplasty within the first 1 year to keep them patent. Here, because there is no venous anastomosis, so this goes directly into the right atrium. So there is no venous anastomosis. So chances of this, venous end stenosis occurring is pretty much zero. Number two, it's all closed. So the disadvantages of a catheter being out and leading to infection is very, very little. Because the end is in the right atrium, the flows are excellent, and it usually doesn't lead to a huge increase in flow. Most of the times they found that the flow in the graft is somewhere between 800 to 1500 and doesn't go much higher. One of the other problems with our patients when they have cardiomyopathy is grafts leading to high output cardiac failure. Unlike AV fistulae, which takes some time, they might take about 2 weeks to reach that 600 ml mark in 600 ml within a day or so, because you need to make a slightly bigger anastomosis, and it's already a big 6 millimeter lumen. Here this is about the inner diameter is 5 millimeters and the outer diameter is 7.4 millimeters. So this supposedly does not cause much of cardiac failure either. So this is something which has been taken up in a big way in America. Hopefully we should have it soon here as well. Now coming to catheters. So we looked at what has been the trend in terms of skin preparation, in terms of AV fistula, AV graft. Then we come to catheters. Unfortunately, in India, we are still using a lot of temporary catheters. Just getting on to the tunnel catheters itself has been a big challenge for us, mostly because of the finances. Whilst a temporary catheter could be placed for maybe anywhere between 5 to 10,000 rupees, the tunnel catheter could cost anywhere between 20 to 40,000 rupees. And convincing the patient that having a temporary catheter which you might have to change 2 or 3 times within the first 3 months might be more financially, it might cause more burden than having this catheter which might stay for much longer, so that you can have a successful fistula by the time this catheter has any problem. Trying to convince them is a big problem. But as I can see, most patients start dialysis with a temporary catheter rather than a tunnel catheter in India. So is that right in what I'm saying? Yeah? Do you feel that most of your patients are starting dialysis with tunnel catheters? Raise your hand if you feel that most of your patients are starting dialysis with tunnel catheters. So most centers, wherever you guys work, still they're having tunnel catheters, and that's how it would look. After the catheter is placed, that's how it would look. So in terms of handling these catheters, so hopefully you guys will be moving to tunnel catheters soon, and that will become a norm. But then handling the catheters is going to be very important. So it's not sufficient that we convince the patient that this is the good thing for you, and if you have this, it will last longer. We have to ensure that it will last longer. For that, the care, good care should be given by the staff, and the patient also has to take good care of the catheter. Using materials like Dynaplast to do the dressing is going to be very harmful for the patient in multiple ways. The skin there starts getting excoriated and leads to infection. Once you have an exit site infection, no matter what material you've used the costliest of the costly tunnel catheters, it doesn't really matter. You're going to introduce infection and we'll have to take the catheter out. So we have to avoid using these harmful dressings and try to move towards these clear semi-permeable dressings which actually allow the skin to breathe as well. So it doesn't allow water, but it will allow air inside, and the skin will be breathing. And then don't put any gauze on top of the exit site so that you can see the exit site. And most of the times, after the first 2 or 3 weeks, once the exit site heals nicely, you don't have to change it every dialysis. You can change it every other dialysis or even once in 7 days. So we use the Stegaderm 3M dressing. There's one more Smith and Andrew or something which is available. That is also pretty similar to this one. This is another dressing from 3M which has got chlorhexidine impregnated sponge there. So it is translucent, it's not transparent, but this one supposedly increases the ability to avoid exit site infections. In large studies that has not been proved. So none of the guidelines recommend this, but it has got a chlorhexidine impregnated sponge in the center there, which can help prevent exit site infections. But more importantly, to avoid exit site infections, we should do simple things, which is wearing the mask. The patient should wear a mask when the dialysis is going on. He or she should not be allowed to eat when the dialysis is going on, which is very rampant. So somebody else will be eating, and that person might be having the fistula. Eating itself is not good because that is going to drop the blood pressure. On top of it, if somebody who's got a catheter is eating, he's going to drop all the saliva and things like that onto the catheter, and then that is going to lead to either catheter-related bacteremia or exit site infection. So you should make sure that you wear a mask when you're handling the catheter. The patient wears a mask when during the course of the dialysis. As I said, exit site care is very important. And then usually we put a suture to hold the catheter. We usually say we'll remove the sutures after about 4 to 6 weeks or so that the dacron cuff which is there in the catheter will heal and will keep the catheter in place. But many Indian patients, we see that they don't have much of subcutaneous fat at all, so the cuff doesn't bed in time. So if that is the case, if there is somebody who is a bit emaciated, not very well nourished, it is better to leave that suture for longer. Don't remove the suture, number one. Number two, don't, just like how, when you have flow problems with your temporary catheters, you twist, turn, pull, push, all those things, nothing to be done with a tunnel dialysis catheter. It should not be touched at all. If there is a flow problem, the doctor has to be told, and no turning, twisting. Otherwise, the catheter will pull out. There are lots of other dressings which are very innovative and helps patients to take bath without any problem, take shower, go and have a swim in the pool as well. So these are all not available, commercially available in India, but then it is not impossible for us to do something indigenous of our own. But these are all possibilities. So similar dressings can be done for peritoneal dialysis catheters as well. In terms of catheter design, so most of the times we are using something here, which could be a cylinder, it could be staggered tip, etc. There are others which have got split. So you've got a barred split, which is split. You've got palindrome, which is it's a symmetrical tip. So various types of catheters are available, and each one claimed to be better than the other in terms of the flow, in terms of reducing recirculation. But it's very difficult to prove all these things in a real scenario, because these are all models where they just use water, they just use fluid. It's not thick, it doesn't have cells. It's a container which is not collapsible, but our veins are collapsible, our heart is collapsible. The fluid is not the same viscosity as that of water. So it's very difficult to emulate what happens in the body in a lab scenario to prove. The palindrome, which has got symmetrical tip, seems to work best for us. There's one more which has come out in 2018, which has got a loop. So many times what happens is when you put the catheter, you see that the tip is almost in the right atrium or in the SVC right atrium junction, but still there's not good flow. That might be because the catheter is hitting against the vessel wall, and then it is sucking against the vessel wall. The patient is already dry and the catheter is just sucking against the vessel wall. So this catheter has got a loop which is PTFE coated, and then this loop will just keep the vein walls apart, and then the catheter will be in the middle. So there won't be any problem with flow. This is not available in India as yet. To reduce the incidence of catheter-related bacteremia, there's a lot of technology available, and also to reduce flow problems, catheters getting clotted, catheters could be impregnated with silver, as here, silver and heparin. So this catheter has got silver and heparin, and there are various ways of doing it as well. You can just coat it, so you've got a catheter and just a coating, or it can be impregnated. Impregnated would mean that wherever there are pores, this antibiotic or the heparin or the silver will go and sit there, or it can be incorporated within the material itself. That's called the bioflow technology. Not just the pores, it is incorporated within the material. So various technologies are there, and each one claiming to be better than the other. We do have these heparin and silver coated catheters in India, but they cost about 45,000 per catheter, and nobody uses them. So we move on to dialyzers. So the first type of dialyzers what we had was cellulose or later on modified cellulose dialyzers, which are still available for those who are allergic to the synthetic membranes. But the most common dialyzers that we use now are polysulfone or polynephron is the most common one. There are lots of other things which are available. They are all invented by different companies, slightly different to each other. But on the whole, the synthetic membranes are the predominant ones that we use now. So, a cellulose membrane, it's the most hydrophilic. All the synthetic membranes are hydrophobic. They don't attract water. The cellulose attracts water, becomes soft and thick, and that's got its own negative problems. The hydrophobic ones, they repel water, but then they get fouled very soon as well. So these are thin initially, but then once they get in touch with water, they swell up. The way that the fibers are arranged also makes a difference. Inherently, cellulose is wavy, but the synthetic ones, they are not wavy, they are quite straight. So when you have got straight fibers next to each other, the flow of dialysate in between them gets hampered. So what the manufacturers do is they make it wavy, they make it ripple, so that there is good flow of dialyzer in between the capillaries. It's also important that the catheters are made properly, because if there is not a good cut, the RBCs tend to get stuck there and you'll have thrombosis. I'll come to pore size distribution later on. There are various sizes of uremic toxins, and broadly we classify them as small, middle and large. All the cellulose or modified cellulose dialyzers clear the small molecules very easily, and the synthetic ones progressively they're able to clear the middle molecules much better. Various terminologies are put there, flux, biocompatibility, KOA and all those things. I'm sure you know all those things. They are very important in selecting the dialyzer, and none of these are able to clear the protein-bound uremic toxins at all. So based on the ultrafiltration, so either we use beta-2 microglobulin clearance, or mostly we use that to tell whether the dialyzer is low flux or high flux. Here, if the beta-2 microglobulin clearance is less than 15, it is called as low flux. Anything above 15 is called high flux. Anything above 70 is called super high flux. So this is a Japanese classification which classifies less than 10 as low flux. Anything which is 30 to 70 is high flux. Anything more than 70 is super high flux. So when you choose a dialyzer, you want to look at the flux, molecular weight cutoff. I'll come to that eventually. The biocompatibility. The design of the dialyzer is also very important. But of late we are giving a lot of importance to the molecular size. You can see that, let us go back. When the pore size distribution is very narrow and you've got pores of the same size, so the molecules of a very tight molecular size will be cleared through this. When you've got pore sizes of different sizes, you can clear small molecules and middle molecules as well, but the quality of dialysis comes down. Here the quality of dialysis is quite good, and that is what is shown in the next graph that I'm going to put up here. So when you've got a low flux dialyzer, your ability to clear molecules which are 15 kilodaltons and more is very little, very little. So mostly you're clearing 500 daltons or somewhere around that mark. When you come to high flux dialyzer, you're able to clear molecules which are about 15 kilodaltons or more to some extent, but you can see that the base is very wide here. When you come to medium cutoff, so there is a difference between cutoff and flux. So you need to know the difference between cutoff and flux. Both of them are a feature of the pore size, but these cutoff, medium cutoff and high cutoff membranes, they have pore sizes which are pretty much the same size all throughout the membrane, and very narrow range they can cover, but that size molecule they can cover much better than the filters which have got high flux or super high flux. So the new thing is a medium cutoff membrane which should be able to clear beta 2 microglobulin and lots of other which have been found to play a role in terms of anemia and cardiovascular remodeling in these patients. So our patients do have a higher level of various cytokines which inhibit, including hepcidin, IL-6, IL-2, which inhibit erythropoiesis. They've got an inhibitory effect on the cardiovascular system, and clearing those things are supposed to give a benefit to the patient. So there's this medium cutoff membrane. The advantage of using medium cutoff membranes is that you don't need ultra pure water. To be able to do high flux dialysis, you need to be doing hemodiafiltration to be able to get the middle molecule clearance. If you're using a high flux or a super high flux membrane but just giving hemodialysis to the patient, your ability to clear middle molecules is going to be very little. You can boast that you're using a high flux membrane, but you're not doing much unless you add the convection into the therapy. Most of us, we do hemodialysis because we don't have ultra pure water. Investing in a water treatment plant which can produce ultra pure water and maintaining that is going to be a lot of cost. So although we are using high flux membranes, we are not doing hemodiafiltration, which takes away the advantage of using the high flux membranes. We are clearing the middle molecules better than hemodialysis, but not too much high. However, with medium cutoff membranes, you don't need to do hemodiafiltration. You don't need ultra pure water. You just use a filter which has got a better pore size and pores of equal diameter all around, and it is found to clear these middle molecules much better. There are studies which can show, which can argue for it, and there are studies which can argue against it. There is one study which I just took out, which was just published about 4 months ago, which is a negative study from Korea. Not very many patients. There's a large study underway. We'll have to watch that. That will come out probably end of next year. Very few number of patients where they compared high flux hemodialysis versus the medium cutoff membrane. As I said, if you're going to use high flux, you need to do hemodiafiltration. There's no point in doing high flux hemodialysis. You're not going to find any benefit. And here once again you can see various parameters, no change at all. So when you do hemodialysis, high flux hemodialysis for 12 months or MCO for 12 months, there's not much of difference in the parameters. The new thing, which has not come to the market yet, but it is still in research stage, is graphene filters. So graphene is ultra thin. So there's a particular way of manufacturing these graphene layers where they actually initially etch it on the copper plates and then leach away the copper, and then they use oxygen to put in holes, and then they use some synthetic material to plug the large holes, and then they put the graphene layer on top of a substrate, and that's how it looks. It is supposed to give pore sizes which are very symmetrical, and it's very ultra thin, so the amount of solute clearance you get is 10 times more, or you can say it is 10 times faster. So what you can achieve in 10 hours with regular hemodialysis, you can achieve in 1 hour using the graphene based membrane. Now moving on to what is going to be the buzz for the next century or next decade maybe, is bionic kidney. So it's evolved over a period of time. So you've had portable dialysis machines, the next stage one or something similar. Then you've got wearable ones, and then you've got the bionic kidney. So one of the first ones, portable dialysis machines to come, was the next stage, which came almost 8 years ago. It came into regular medical use almost 8 years ago. Many centers in the West where people are doing home hemodialysis are using the next stage machine. So you don't need a huge amount of water. It requires only about 5 liters of water, and then it will recycle that, and then it's a very small, compact machine which can do home hemodialysis. And then various other companies, Fresenius also are working on their portable dialysis machine. I think it's probably FDA approved. And then there's one which has got a research facility in Whitefield itself, which is Medtronic. They're also in the final stages of coming out with their dialysis machine, which should be the size of a suitcase. You can take it anywhere. It just requires, I think, about 5 liters of water, and it uses solvent technology to replenish the water. The wearable kidney project has been going on for almost 15 years now. There are a few patients who've used it in the West, but large-scale human studies have not been done. It's almost about 5.5 kilos to wear, so not everybody can wear this wearable kidney and walk around. I'll just make a flying mentioning of peritoneal dialysis here, because there's been not much of advances in peritoneal dialysis of late, apart from the wearable automated peritoneal dialysis machine. This one is not in clinical use yet, but that's probably the most compatible one. The one which is in clinical use is the AWAC, which is I don't know what it stands for. I forgot what it stands for. There's a long form to it. So it is the size of a small handbag that you can see this lady carrying here. And so patients can take it with them like their handbag. It's connected to the catheter in the tummy, and then you can see the catheter there, and that's the small PD machine. It uses solvent technology once again to replenish the water, and that's the cartridge you can see. Previous versions, you needed to change the cartridge 2 or 3 times every day. The current one, which is FDA approved, you just have to change it once in 4 or 5 days. And the in thing is the kidney project from San Francisco. That is Dr. Shuai Roy holding the bionic kidney, which is probably the size of your coffee mug. And the heart of it is a small chip there which does all the work, and that's a cartoon representation of it being fixed. So the human studies are supposed to start now, sometime this month. They've got funding for that. They've done lots of animal studies. They've put it in a few human patients, and it seems to have worked all right. So the slightly larger scale human studies are supposed to start in January 2020. So this is bioengineered once again. So I told you about our inability to clear protein-bound uremic toxins. So this one has got a layer of tubular endothelial cells, which should be technology, and also it is bionic. It can remove protein-bound toxins as well. That's Dr. Shripat, who is actually of Indian origin. That's all I have. Thank you.